can do this together if we all stand together. We can do this together if we all stand together.
It's an open mic, which means it's open. Ask us anything you want during the time that we're here. Any questions you have, you can post in the chat box. And from time to time, Ray will stop me, or at intervals, certain intervals, I will stop myself, and I will address the questions. So if I'm moving too fast, hit the slow down button and I will slow down. If I'm moving too slow, hit the speed up button and I will improve that as well. All right, there are 20 slides. Most of these slides are administrative. This is about 6 or 7 important ones. But we're here today to talk about the AIM Act and its impact on fire suppression systems. My name is Ted Atwood, and I've been doing this for about 27 years. Part of our role in this industry during those 27 years was to be refrigerant recyclers and F-gas handling company. So we recycled all kinds of things, including halons and fire suppression gases of all kinds, including R125 and R227 EA, which is still, both are in service. As well, it's also important to point out that there are still many halon systems in service. We have one very large client in Alaska, and they did not shut down their halon system at the end of the CFC era, because the system is massive and it had never been discharged. So as a result, those halons are still sitting ready for use in case of a fire. It's a fairly significant system. We do believe they will make a transition soon, but they waited through this final transition period, and I think we're there.
Ted, when you go and pull in a gas station, you've got all those tubes in the overhang above the pumps for suppression. What are those using?
Well, there are, we're going to get to that a little bit later on,
Okay.
like the different type of fire suppression. It's chemical fire suppression. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too.
Okay.
So, but here, anyone who's unaware of this topic, it is referred to as the AIM Act, American Innovation and Manufacturing Act. It was signed in December of 2020. It was embedded in the final funding for that session of Congress for COVID-19 supplementary expense coverage. I think it was about a $2 trillion bill. The overall bill is about 1,800 lines long, and the section that refers to fire suppression starts on page 1074 and goes to 1094. So that helps. Maybe the only thing that saves you some time if you're unfamiliar with the actual act. All right, so this was published in the Federal Register on May 19th. It was the first rulemaking under the AIM Act, and this Federal Register publication then became final rule on September 23rd, 2021. So many of the things that we're going to be talking about today are already firmly in place. So if you own or manage a spacecraft, you do not need to stay on this call. You do not have to worry. Congress set aside an allowance for onboard aerospace fire suppression systems. You've been excluded from the AIM Act. However, for the rest of you who do not own a spacecraft, I should stick around for a little while. You may learn a thing or two. There are numerous industries that are going to be impacted by this regulation. But for those of you who are not NFPA professionals, that's National Fire Protection Association professionals, you might want to know where these systems can be found in your infrastructure, because the materials that we're talking about specifically today are in your fire suppression systems. And if you own a telecommunication facility or a computer room, art gallery, really any facility like grocery store with a kitchen, gas stations, you probably have an FM 200 system or something similar, and that system contains a material called HFC 227EA. Now, companies that produce, import, export, destroy, you are all affected. As well, any company that owns a fire suppression system, you're also impacted. And it's an interesting time to talk about these fire suppression systems, because not only is there more regulatory structure around this and a limit, an allocation for access to these materials, but also there's a lot of accountability related to reporting and disclosure of use of these fire suppression materials in your ESG records. So it's something to be aware of. You may not be accounting for these in your present reports. Ray, any questions so far?
No, it's pretty clear. But you mentioned that this section is 20 pages way out in the files. How long is the entire report, the AIM Act?
No, the AIM Act is only about 20 pages long.
I mean, I'm sorry, the May report, or was it September?
Yeah, they're all about 20 pages. I mean, you got to read through each of them to find the important parts, but they're all about 20 pages.
Okay.
All right, here in front of you are a list of agents that are part of the NFPA's 2001 standards. Now, you'll notice at the top, there's something called the HCFC Blend A. That is a mixture of 4 HCFCs. Very, very low use right now. You're going to see a material there called FC51-12. That material is known, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it's a ketone, so that material is not affected by this rule. But the ones below that are R124 was an HCFC, R125 is an HFC, as is 227EA, 236, R23, 1311. Those materials are all known as HCFCs. So those things have already been under control, but I think it's important for you to take a minute and reflect on the list here. In many situations, you may not know the impact or even the source material that's in your fire suppression systems. So you're going to want to ask your fire suppression supplier company for an inventory sheet on what systems you have. Another thing that you'll want to think about is if you own these systems, many of you do, what will you do with them post life? For instance, if you own an FM 200 based Series A approved fire extinguisher, will it be smart for you to hold on to these systems and decommission them over time using the concentrate of HFC 125 that's in them for potential future use? We have seen that being done lately. Or will it be something that you want to trade back into your fire suppression company so they can extract the 125? If they do that, you want to ask yourself, do you need documentation on end of life? So be very careful and aware of that, and make sure you have the conversation with your vendor or your supplier. Why is it important? Because pound for pound, R227, and it is referred to as R227, by the way, it has a global warming potential that's 3 times greater than CO2.
3,000 times, right?
Yeah, did I say 3?
You said 3.
Yeah, sorry, 3,000.
3,000, wow.
So 1 pound of 227 is 1.5 tons of CO2. So that's significant. Now,
yeah,
R227 is the base product in FM 200. And there is a replacement for it. It's Novec 1230. Now, this is a ketone that I was mentioning to you earlier. And I think you'll find that Most fire suppression companies are aware of the coming change. You'll start to see some of these systems be replaced. The issue you want to pay attention to is the number one cause of problem in replacing a fire extinguisher, besides the fact that the date will expire, is a slight leakage in the system. So it'll go from a green to a red. You know, there's a little meter in there, and you want to be careful of that, because that leak is, if it's a FM 200/227 system, then it's leaking R227. So these systems are all over the place. The size of this industry is massive. It's in the billions of dollars, not hundreds of millions, but billions. So it's very important that you pay attention to the inventory that you're managing.
And Ted, so the way these systems work, the gas is just sitting in storage in a tank somewhere waiting for a fire. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any degradation of the compounds inside, or does it just sit there inert until flames shoot out?
Yep, it sits there inertly waiting to be used. The cylinders, like anything, have threaded ports, so they do leak over time. You know, so you got to be aware of that. But that's why we have a really large client that has nearly 400,000 pounds of halon all in one place.
That's the Alaska one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Wow.
And it's been sitting there for 35 years.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Very good.
this chart is from the EPA, and it talks a little bit about what's happening. You know, you'll see it mentions HCFCs. This is technically the last time the EPA published what's referred to as a SNAP, Significant New Alternative Program, allowance adjustment for fire suppression gases. So
That was 2015 or before it?
it was published right before the end of 2015. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So you can see the EPA has not published a recent update to the alternative allowances, mostly because the fire suppression companies themselves usually make the transition in advance of that requirement. Now, if you're wondering, what does all this mean and what's the impact? As of the 23rd of September, the EPA established a 90% baseline for next year. Now, it doesn't sound like much, a 10% reduction. But if you consider the fact that the industry has been growing at about 6%, and then next year we're going to have a forced adjustment of 10% reduction, that will lead to approximately 16% of the market that will be underfulfilled as a result of the supply adjustment controls put in place by EPA. Now, what's going to happen is, very likely, this is the list of of regulated HFCs. And you'll see in the box on the upper right side, 227EA, 236, and you saw those both on the earlier charts, and 245, which is also a known fire suppressant. What we'll likely see are companies who get allocation that are fire suppression companies trading their allowances to refrigerant companies. And you'll see these companies likely replace the 227 with something like Novec 1230. So we fully expect to see a big market shift here, which means that very soon it is very likely that you will no longer be receiving HFC-based fire suppression systems. Now, the letter symbol relates to the allowable use for these materials, and HFCs are in A and C. However, C is made up of a combination of allowable things in the A and B category. So Ray, you were asking a question earlier about flammable liquids. Well, they don't tend to use as much FM 200 as other things do.
Okay.
They use FM 200 a lot in confined areas because it doesn't produce any toxic results,
Hmm.
and it doesn't suffocate people. So they tend to use different materials in the B category.
What is combustible metal?
Well, it could be anything. There's a bunch of combustible metals out there. I can't think of one off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but metals that are at liquid will combust.
Okay.
So, and really what happens with the HFC based refrigerants is they're about a 7 to 20% concentration in these containers. They're not 100% HFC. They usually have a media that is sprayed out as well as the HFC as the propellant.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is the industry is going to transition over to these newer materials, but it's important for property owners, managers, anybody who has the responsibility for reporting or owning these systems to be aware of what's on site and what that change will look like. And I think this is going to be a really rapid change.
Yeah.
So what should you be looking for on a timeline? Well, September 23rd is come and gone. The final rule's been published, and it's now fully in place. January 1, 2022 is a 10% reduction, but really it's closer to a 16% when you consider the year-over-year growth. And by 2024, that number of available pounds for the HFC marketplace related to fire suppression will be down 40%. So it's a big number.
Yeah.
We're waiting for additional rulemakings right now. And there was a series of petitions granted on the 7th of October, and we're waiting on the Federal Register publication to be released by EPA. So, all right, well, here at Trakref, we are committed to monitoring and tracking requirements related to HVACR, refrigerant, and F-gas. And we do it at all levels. Our job is to inform clients about the changes and build solutions, ensure everybody's prepared. That's our goal. And today is another step in that same direction. And in a couple of weeks, we do these every 2 weeks. We're going to have another discussion on environmental sustainability through refrigerant drawdown. We think there's a better path. So we're partnering with Rotary International on a project through their standing group called SRAG. And that's the acronym there, Environmental Sustainability and Refrigerant Action Group. That's SRAG. And we're going to be talking about a new project that they've got. We're kind of excited about it. It's taken us 20 years to come up to speed on this thinking process, but what you'll find out that day is a little bit more details about why this is a better solution and what Rotary is going to do with those destroyed refrigerants and how that can benefit a whole group of people globally. Ray, you have any other questions?
No, but I did look it up real quick. It's kind of interesting. The combustible metals, potassium, sodium.
Yeah, sodium. Yep, you're exactly right.
Lithium batteries and plutonium. So you got to be careful of that one. Calcium, magnesium, and titanium are the most common for Class D fire. Interesting, at least to me.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. All right. Well, there's lots of other resources here on the page. Anybody that didn't get a chance to ask questions, please send us an email.
And if you're watching on YouTube, just follow the links below back to trakref.com. Thanks, Ted.
All right, Ray, thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So how's about we talk about those Hfcs? Just read the facts if you don't believe me. Watch your leakage, disposal, and recycle, it's key. Cause we can do this together if we all stand together.